The first months in any job feel like learning a language you're only half hearing. You watch people move through routines you don't yet understand, using shortcuts that seem arbitrary, responding to unspoken signals you can't decode. Most people experience this as temporary confusion. They assume clarity will arrive once they learn the systems, but for those who stay decades, that initial disorientation never fully resolves. It transforms into something else. The confusion doesn't disappear, it becomes structural. What changes is the relationship to not knowing. The person stops waiting for the moment when everything makes sense and starts building a life around partial comprehension. This is not adaptation. It's a quiet renegotiation of what understanding means. The explanations people offer for staying are almost always insufficient. They'll say stability, pension, loyalty, comfort. These words function as social placeholders, acceptable answers that end conversations, but they don't describe the actual psychological architecture. The real reasons operate several layers beneath stated justification. Someone might say they stayed for the benefits while actually staying because leaving would require reassembling their identity in a way that feels equivalent to dismemberment. The stated reason protects them from articulating the true one. This gap between public explanation and private mechanism is where the actual psychology lives. Most people never examine it. They repeat their explanations until the explanations become indistinguishable from belief. After enough years, patterns emerge that others don't see. Not the obvious patterns, the ones about workflow or office politics. Deeper patterns, the way certain problems resurface every 18 months, wearing different language. The way institutional memory functions as a weapon disguised as helpfulness. The way new leadership always announces change using the exact same grammatical structures their predecessors used, as if reading from a script they don't realize exists. Someone who has watched this cycle repeat understands something fundamental about organizations that shorter tenure employees can't access. They see the institution as a kind of organism with its own metabolism, indifferent to the individuals moving through it. This recognition doesn't produce bitterness. It produces a strange form of clarity. They stop taking things personally because they've watched the same dynamics devour different people in identical ways. The psychological inversion happens gradually. What started as a choice, staying in the job, becomes the foundation of identity. Then the identity begins to justify the choice retroactively. The person constructs a narrative where their longevity demonstrates something admirable about their character, rather than something conditional about their circumstances. This isn't dishonest. It's how humans maintain coherence. But it creates a feedback loop. The longer they stay, the more their identity depends on having stayed. The decision calcifies into personality. Eventually, it becomes impossible to separate who they are from what they've endured. Leaving would not just mean changing jobs. It would mean becoming someone they've spent decades not being. The cost of departure compounds annually, silently, until the weight is unthinkable. The hidden costs don't announce themselves. They accumulate in cognitive habits. After years of solving the same category of problem, the mind optimizes for that specific terrain. Neurological pathways deepen. Response patterns automate. This creates extraordinary efficiency within a narrow domain and subtle incapacity outside it. Someone who has spent 40 years in a single institutional context develops remarkable facility with that context's logic and meaningful deficits in translating skills to different environments. They can navigate political labyrinths that would paralyze newcomers, but they may struggle with ambiguity that lacks familiar anchors. The expertise becomes double-edged. It's real and it's limiting. Most people don't notice the limitation because they never leave the environment where their expertise functions. The cost only becomes visible in hypothetical departures that never occur. There is advantage in being the one who remembers. Institutional knowledge is power, but not the kind people imagine. It's not about knowing where files are kept or who to call. It's about understanding which battles have already been lost, which ideas have already failed, which personalities will inevitably collide. This knowledge makes the long-term employee invaluable in specific moments and invisibly constraining in others. They can prevent repetition of past mistakes, but they can also prevent exploration of past failures that might succeed under different conditions. Their memory becomes a form of governance. New employees often experience this as obstruction without realizing they're encountering compressed history. The long-term employee isn't being difficult. They're watching a pattern repeat and trying to save people from pain they've already witnessed. But saved pain is indistinguishable from denied opportunity. Socially, something shifts. Relationships with colleagues who leave become complicated. Each departure is a small referendum on the choice to stay. The person who leaves implicitly suggests that staying is optional, which destabilizes the narrative of inevitability. The person who stays must either frame the departure as a mistake or acknowledge that their own choice is just that, a choice, not a necessity. Most people resolve this by developing a subtle superiority about loyalty or a quiet contempt for restlessness. They begin to see people who change jobs frequently as lacking depth, commitment, the ability to see things through. This judgment protects them from the anxiety of comparison. It also isolates them. Over time, their closest relationships become concentrated among others who have also stayed, creating an echo chamber where longevity is virtue and departure is weakness. The social world tightens around the choice until the choice becomes the world. Identity solidifies in unexpected ways. The job becomes the primary lens through which life is interpreted. Events outside work are understood in relation to work rhythms. Vacations are defined by their distance from work stress. Retirement is imagined as the absence of work rather than the presence of something else. The self-concept narrows. Hobbies atrophy or become professionalized. Friendships drift toward utility. The internal narrative simplifies. There's a peculiar relief in this. Complexity is exhausting. Having one clear structure, one domain of competence, one stable identity reduces the cognitive load of being a person. But it also produces a kind of fragility. When the structure eventually ends, through retirement or elimination of the position, the person faces a disorientation more profound than the initial confusion of starting the job. They must reconstruct identity without the scaffolding that has supported it for decades. Some people navigate this successfully. Others discover they've become a shape that only fits one space. What resolves is not the tension, but the relationship to it. People who have stayed 40 years in the same job rarely regret the choice. In simple terms, regret requires a clear alternative, and they've spent decades not cultivating alternatives. What they experience instead is a kind of recursive acceptance. They accept that they accepted. They build meaning from the fact of having stayed, rather than from what staying provided. The job itself may have been tedious, frustrating, meaningless, but the act of enduring it becomes the meaning. This is not rationalization. It's a legitimate form of narrative construction. Humans make sense of their lives by finding coherence in their choices. The 40-year employee has chosen, again and again, through inaction or active decision, to remain. That pattern of choosing constitutes a life. Whether it's the life they would have designed from the beginning is a question that stops mattering. They're too far downstream to reroute. The river has carried them somewhere specific. They learn to call it a destination.